6.2 is talking about your basis of factoring. We're looking at quadratic formula, quadratic functions here. So they are in this form of ax squared plus bx plus c. They have an x squared, an x, and then a number without an x. So 2x's, 1x, and no x's. So what we're going to look at here is what happens when there's not a number in front of x squared, or there's a 1 in front of x squared, actually. So this section is all just these problems. There's not a number in front of the x squared. So what happens here, what factoring is if I had this right here, when we had two binomials, I think I said it earlier, we could do what? We could put all these back out, and I'd get x squared minus 5x, and then 2x, and negative 10. So I'd add these up in the middle and get x squared minus 3x minus 10. Okay, what factoring is it's going the opposite way. It's starting here and working back to here. Okay? And the way you do that, the way you're going to do that is you're going to look at what multiplies to be the last number and adds up to be the middle number. And if you look back here, negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. So if I have x squared plus 6x plus 8, and I'm going to do this on accident at some point in time, so I might as well write it. I kind of do this as just a visual aid. So what multiplies to be 8 and adds up to be 6? 2 and 4. So I come over here and I put my two binomials like this. X times x is x squared, so that works. X times x is x squared. And then I do 2 times 4 is 8. 2 plus 4 is 6.
It doesn't matter which number you put in the first.
No, it does not, because if I switch it around, it works the same way. 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So still the same thing. So if I have x squared minus 5x minus 14. So here I'm looking at, okay, what multiplies to be negative 14 and adds up to be negative 5? Negative 7 and positive 2. So you got to be careful with your signs here. So x times x is x squared. Negative 7 plus 2 is negative 7 times 2 is negative 14. Negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5. Okay, so be careful with your signs. Let me write out a couple problems real quick here. I'll show you a pattern. You don't have to know this pattern, but it's nice. Wait, that doesn't work. All right, so there's only 4 different options here with your signs. We'll kind of go through these problems, and then I'll show you the pattern that works on these. So the first one, this one says, okay, x times x is x squared. Well, it multiplies to be 5 and adds up to be 6. 5 and 1, right? 5 times 1 is 5. 5 plus 1 is 6. On this one, what multiplies to be 15 and adds up to be negative 8? Negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. Negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. What multiplies to be negative 24 and adds up to be 10? This one's tricky. Okay. This is fine. If you get stuck, here's the easiest thing to do if you get stuck. Go find the factor pairs. 24 divided by 1 is 24. Do those add up to be 10? No. 24 divided by 2 is 12. Could those add or subtract to be 10? Yes. So x times x is x squared. 12 and 2, what about my signs? Negative 2, positive 12. 12 minus 2 is 10. 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. So just come over here and do all your factor pairs. It doesn't take that long to come through them. All right, and then the last one will multiplies to be -6 and adds up to be -5. Well, it multiplies to be 6. So if you did -6 and 1, does that work right?
Yes.
Yes, that does, right? -6 times 1 is -6. -6 plus 1 is -5. All right, so this is all your possibilities. The reason I go through all these is because there's actually a pattern. If you don't like the sign, that the signs mess you up a little bit, there is a trick to these. If the last sign is positive, that tells you they are going to be the same. They're going to be the same. So first of all, if my last sign is positive, that tells me these are going to be the same. So they're both positive here. This one's positive, last sign's positive, they're both negative. Okay? And they're both going to be whatever the middle sign is. So since this one is positive, they're the same, and that means they're both positive. So this tells me they're the same, that tells me they're both positive. This one tells me they're the same, that one tells me they're both negative. So you don't even have to think about the signs. And this is purely if you don't like adding positive and negative and all that. So this tells me they're the same as the middle sign. Same as the middle sign. If the last number is negative, or the last sign is negative, the last sign is negative, then they're different. Okay, they're going to be different. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. So here's -1, +1, negative. Here's -1, -1, positive. And the bigger number gets the middle sign. The bigger number will always get the middle sign. So right here I have 12 and 2. The middle numbers, this tells me they're going to be different. This tells me the bigger number is going to get that. So 12 bigger than 2, so 12 gets the positive. Here, this tells me they're going to be different. The middle number is negative, so the bigger number will get a negative sign. So 6 is bigger than 1, so 6 gets the negative. So again, if you don't like negatives and positive adding them, then you can kind of look at those patterns. All right, what if I have when we go through, when we kind of add all the factorings, I'll kind of write out all the steps of factoring because when you mix it all together, it gets confusing. What you want to do, though, is the very first step will always be to take the GCF out. Okay, so we're not talking about numbers in front of x squared yet. So what is the GCF of this? Because if you take the GCF out, it gives you smaller numbers. So if I divide this by 2, I get x squared plus 5x plus 6. And now I say, okay, what's multiplying to be 6 and adds up to be 5? Three and 2, right? 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. So x times x is x squared. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. Let's go. Where's my problem? Oh, go back to it. Back in. So here, x squared plus x. Do one like that. X squared plus x minus 72. So here we're looking at what multiplies to be negative 72 and adds up to be what number? It'd be 1, right? So there's a 1 right here. So what multiplies to be negative 72 and adds up to be 1? -8 and +9, correct. So 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. And again, if you want to use that pattern here, negative tells me they're going to be different. So one's going to be plus, one's going to be minus. 9 times 8 is 72, and 9 minus 8 is 1. So 9's a bigger number. It gets the plus sign since that's a plus. 8's a smaller number.
Is there another step to that one right above?
This one?
Yeah, that final answer there, isn't there another step you have to do?
You might be thinking ahead a little bit. If there's an equal sign in here, there's another step you have to do. There's not an equal sign yet. On these two, you can always FOIL them back out to check your answer. So let's talk about that one. X squared plus 6xy plus 6x squared. All right, on this one, every single problem so far, we've come to our answer right here, and I've said, okay, x times x is x squared, coming from the left side. X times x is x squared on the left side. Well, here this has a y squared and a y right here coming from the right side. So to account for that y squared and y, just like there's an x squared and an x here, I can just put y and y on the right side. Y times y gives me y squared. So now do the same steps. What multiplies to be 6 and adds up to be 7? 1 and 6. So x plus 1, we don't have to write the 1. So 6y times y is 6y squared. X times x is x squared, and then you have to multiply outer and the inner to get the middle number. All right, solve this problem next. I'm not missing a variable because, again, kind of like this problem, let's just look at this. What multiplies to be a4 times, what would multiply times itself to be a to the 4th? A squared. A squared times a squared would be a to the 4th. A squared times a squared would be a to the 4th. So now what multiplies to be negative 3 and adds up to be negative 2? It does work, doesn't it? Negative 3, positive 1, yeah. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So here, a squared times a squared is a to the 4th. And if I add those up, a squared plus a squared is going to give me my middle term. So anytime you have, if this was like a to the 8th, it would just be a4 times a4. You actually just cut it in half. On this one right here, rearrange it first. Rewrite that as t squared. What is it? 7t minus 30t plus t squared. Don't try to work it like this. Rewrite it with this 2 t's first, then 1 t, and then no t's. So now it looks like normal. So what multiplies to be negative 30 and adds up to be 7? T times t is t squared. Ten and 3. So it'd be what? Positive 10, negative 3? So negative 3 times 10 is negative 30. Negative 3 plus 10 is 7. That one, what do you got to do first on this one? Yes, so GCF. Take out the GCF on that one. All right, so the next section, 2x squared minus 9x. We may not get all the way into this, but I'm going to do kind of half of it today.